quite alien to their practice. I thought it was going to be impossible to make anything. But then you start seeing that they are real masters of their craft, and they can do absolutely anything with it at any scale. There isn't the expertise in England, the teamwork, the can-do attitude. Now there's a new wealth coming in all over China. The people are willing to spend a lot of money on beautiful objects. Unfortunately, I love making beautiful objects.
Every piece of porcelain that left Jingdezhen for Europe followed the same route, and I'm going to follow that route too.
The Acropolis on the Chinese vase. I've not seen that before.
The journey itself is, in part, what made Chinese porcelain so special. Before I set off, I've got to select my own piece to export.
So you've got underglazed blue, very traditional, very nice, very pretty. Now that is Ming in style. Fangu means replica. Okay, so that goes back. Now let's put that back carefully. Not wildly keen on that. I think that the shape of the mouth is very weak. I'm going to avoid all this very colourful stuff. Great colour. The mark says Dao Guang, 1821 to 1850. And you know, I thought I was going to come in here for a piece of blue and white, but this pink is actually rather good. I didn't realise I was going to go pink. How much? 680 yuan. That's approximately £70. How about 480?
550.
I'll say 500, and that really is my last one.
它最多是500。
Okay. We'll call that a deal.
Pot in box, time to hit the road, which was really a waterway. Canton is over 700 miles south of here. How did millions of pieces of china make the journey? The first leg takes us west by river, down to a vast inland freshwater sea, Lake Boyang. At least it's a lake for most of the year.
In the dry season in winter, it dries right back to marshland. The porters, who of course were a specialised guild and passed their trade down from father to son, they knew the weather intimately. So they would wait for the right weather conditions for maximum length of journey each day.
So the porcelain has been made, the order has been delivered to the merchant in Jingdezhen. It's safely stowed, and the porter has brought it to the shores of Lake Boyanghu, our first major obstacle. We have to cross this lake and find another river and head for Canton.
Today, motorboatmen make the going easy, but their ancestors had to use great poles to push the porcelain barges across.
Lake Boyang, 30 leagues in compass, that's the size of Leicestershire, formed by the confluence of 4 rivers, each as large as the Loire. It is also subject to hurricanes, like the seas of China, for in less than a quarter of an hour, the wind will veer round all the points of the compass and sometimes sink the largest of boats. In approaching the most dangerous part of the lake, the temple appears built on a steep rock, on the site of which the Chinese mariners burn incense and sacrifice a cock. This was not an easy crossing, and I suspect that on the bottom of this lake there are plenty of barks which have come down over hundreds of years. There's a whole ceramic history lying on the seabed of Lake Boyang. It's a shallow lake, easily whipped up. I think we're lucky, but we just got to watch out for the pirates.
In mid-lake, some boatmen would pivot on their poles and change course.
The porcelain wares going up to court had to be poled across the Boyang Lake, down the Yangtze River, and then up the Grand Canal to Beijing, to the capital.
These porcelain masterpieces were never intended to be seen, let alone touched, by anyone outside the Celestial Empire.
Porcelain that was going overseas had to go south.
The second leg of the journey to the coast meant a 260-mile haul through the valley of the River Gan. The boats were wide, but with a very shallow draft. River punts designed not for speed, but for stability. They were poled from the rear or dragged by men with hawsers on the banks. The cargo weighed tons. I lay me down by the waters of the Gan inside a sleeper train, mindful of what the boatmen had had to endure.
The Gan River is quite shallow and it does have rapids. The barges used for the porcelain barrels, they're weighed down by the porcelain, so they're fairly stable, but they were difficult and heavy to pole along. And for long passages of the river, they were dependent on the power of the human body to make them move along. And that was very hard work at points on the river. The work was sought after by men who were able-bodied, fairly young, because the life of a bargee or a boatman was not very extended. When your strength gave out, you stopped being able to work in that profession.
The train makes the journey to Guangzhou by night, delivering the traveller refreshed to this creaky, tree-shaded river town, which, all through the year, would have been filled with exhausted boatmen.
At this point, the mighty Gan River, rising over in the east and looping its way around, heads north, another 200 miles up to Lake Boyang. And it's against that north-going current that the boats are coming upstream, helped by trackermen carrying hawsers on their shoulders and wading through the shoals, sometimes in very, very rough water. And here, the river splits, and it's up this second river, a faster-flowing river, that the barges have to continue for another 80 kilometres before finding yet another challenge.
From here, it would have been an easier voyage downstream to Canton if there hadn't been a mountain in the way. The boatmen of the Gan carried their loads to the town of Dayu, the place where the most hazardous stage of the journey began. What was once a pivotal junction is now literally a backwater. The river is sluggish, the current switched off higher upstream by dams generating electricity. Quays that once thronged with stevedores and boatmen are now a park. But even that's been abandoned by the gardeners.
Here it is, a tablet commemorating the trade. This marks the point of a really important trade route. And when we're talking important trade route, we're talking not M1, we're talking Heathrow Airport. In fact, you can just see here characters for Ming and Qing.
The trade was private, not state-run, and there are no figures for the value of the business that passed through Dayu, but it lasted for centuries and must, in today's terms, have been worth billions.
The porcelain's been offloaded from the barges. It's come up the wharf, and we've been greeted by an army of stick men. The men with their sticks who are going to carry this huge burden, this several barge loads of porcelain like ants over the mountain before us. And men like these have actually been responsible for building all of China for over 2,000 years, the Great Wall, the Grand Canal, and even the apartment blocks today. We see men running through the streets with these. An elegant sliver of bamboo, beautifully sprung like light steel. And if you get the rhythm right, you can walk with a jaunty step, which is what I'm going to attempt to do, over the mountain being in that direction. This for balance and my cameraman has very kindly given me some camera kit to balance my precious bars, and let's see whether we can go.
The porters were headed for a gap in the Nan mountain range. The Meiling Pass was cut out of the rock during the Song dynasty, a remarkable feat of engineering by thousands of nameless labourers. It made the passage just a bit easier for the porcelain.
You needed brute strength and endurance. Some men were employed on a full-time basis, but many men were employed from a large labour force, and they were picked by the gang masters to carry the porcelain up and over.
Ooh. Oh, these guys were fit.
They ate pretty much a very carbohydrate-rich diet with a minimum of protein.
Nearly there. Or not. Probably not.
They didn't eat a lot of sugar, so the Chinese peasant would eat a lot of things like fat, which we find very distasteful, but of course it gives you a lot of energy.
Summit in view.
And the great problem always is in eating enough calories each day to keep you going.
Paid by the day, most porters were carrying more than twice their own body weight. Years of hill climbing with loads balanced on one shoulder led to appalling physiological trauma.
I think her plums were lighter than these. We're here at the top of the Meiling Pass. I don't believe it. What a climb. And to think that 99.9% of the Chinese porcelain that we see in the great stately homes of England and of Europe made this journey up these very steps, through this very gateway and on. A tremendous human effort. And these men, they were fit. They were even more wiry than me. Some of the porters were carrying half a ton in a case, slung between poles, 4 men carrying one case up there. I'm full of admiration, and even now I know I should look differently at Chinese porcelain in stately homes. And there's the inscription of the Emperor Kangxi, late 17th century inscription. And the inscription above the gateway itself saying, "The Pass of Heroes." So here goes one aspirant hero. Bye-bye, Jiangxi. Hello, Guangdong.
It was a dangerous route. The cobbles were worn smooth by millions of footsteps. You would almost rather break your own bones than break the porcelain. Penalties for dropping or breaking pieces could be quite high.
On the other side of the mountain, the stick men could relax, their work done. The porcelain now moved back onto the waters of the Pearl River. This scene of industry has changed very little in the intervening centuries. It would have been familiar to traders from the Port of London, except they were prohibited from coming up country to see it for themselves. With Canton the final port of call in China, a mere 240 miles downstream, the boatmen might have been able to take things easier. These waters are slower moving, but there are still dangerous bends and dire penalties for anyone losing a load.
Let's see whether it stood in one piece. I have to admit, I did stumble on a couple of occasions on that pass. Moment of truth. Intact. Great. I'm really pleased. And why pink? Well, the fact is I've always liked monochromes. Quite unlike